Hello, and welcome to the 2022 Virginia Festival of the Book, presenting The Inner Work of Racial Justice by Rhonda Mcgee. I'm Jane Kulo, Director of the Virginia Center for the Book, a program of Virginia Humanities. Thanks for joining us. A couple of notes before we begin. Please share your questions for the author using the Q&A tab on Zoom. This event has optional closed captioning, which you can turn on and customize at any time with the tab at the bottom of your window. If you haven't already read today's book, we hope you will. For details about how to buy it from a local bookseller, visit vabook.org, where you can also explore the schedule of upcoming programs and watch past events. While you're there, please consider making a donation to support the festival's ongoing work at vabook.org/give. We greatly appreciate the support of our sponsors for this event, CFA Institute and Susan and Norman Colpitts. We thank the Insight Meditation community of Charlottesville for sharing this event with their large community. And thank you to our bookseller for this event, UVA Bookstore. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. Rhonda V. Magee, author of The Inner Work of Racial Justice, is professor of law at the University of San Francisco and a leading thought and practice innovator in the area of mindfulness-based anti-racism and social justice. She is the inaugural recipient of the Reed Smith Excellence in Well-Being in Law Award, a student of a range of Buddhist traditions and a fellow of the Mind and Life Institute. Magee has served as an advisor to a number of leading mindfulness-based professional development organizations, including the University of Massachusetts Center for Mindfulness, the Brown Mindfulness Center, the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, and the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society. She earned her bachelor's, master's, and JD at the University of Virginia. Our moderator, Eboni Bugg, has worked to improve lives in the Charlottesville area in a variety of roles, including educator, social worker, therapist, and yoga teacher. She is currently the director of programs for the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation, where she stewards philanthropic resources for community impact. Thank you all for joining us today. Eboni, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jane, and welcome to everyone joining us for this amazing conversation with Rhonda Magee. I am just really thrilled and honored to be able to facilitate this discussion with Rhonda, a fellow triple who I had the pleasure of working with through the Mind and Life Institute previously. And so we're going to go ahead and dig in. Welcome, Rhonda.
Hey there. It is such a pleasure to be with you, my dear Eboni, and with everybody who's taken the time to be here. I'm just appreciating this opportunity to talk about the book and to be with you.
Excellent. Well, why don't we get started by sharing with our audience a little bit about the book, sort of what was the impetus for writing it, and who's the audience that you had in mind as you were bringing this to life?
Thank you so much. So I'll first of all start by doing this corny thing of raising the book up in case just so everybody knows what we're talking about. The Inner Work of Racial Justice, Healing Ourselves and Transforming Our Communities Through Mindfulness. And it has a foreword by my friend and colleague in the work, John Kabat-Zinn. And I wrote this partly to capture in one place some of my own experience on the path of my own inner work and the way that had intersected up to this point with my career as a professor, a teacher in law, a kind of a member of a teaching and learning community here in San Francisco with some networks across the country. And so the book grew out of, I think, in large measure, again, my own personal journey. Born, of course, in this body, and born in, by the way, in North Carolina in the late 1960s, and so growing up in the 70s and 80s in this sort of desegregating, sort of tentatively integrating context in the United States, and born in a family where, all of the legacies of our history of race-based and gender-based stratification were very real. So though, we had each other, we had a lot of love, we also were relatively impoverished, and my own family members had not had many opportunities, even though some African Americans had during that time. My family members did not have opportunities to go to college or to even fully necessarily finish high school. So I grew up in a very kind of working class, impoverished, stratified, like, we were in that lower caste, if you will, that was a complete creation of, our systems of segregation. And the legacies of enslavement. And so, I though grew up born in the last year of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. And so born into a time where opportunities were possible for my generation that had not been possible for the prior. And so I happen to be, for a variety of reasons that I can claim credit for and not, sort of the type of person to really take advantage of every possible opportunity, and that enabled me to get an education and then to become a teacher. But at the same time, I was personally feeling a lot of the slings and arrows of, being a woman of color, a Black woman, in academia, moving into spaces where people like me had not been before. And so I was relying a lot on my own personal practices, some based in the Christianity in which I was raised, but ultimately some based in Buddhism that I, learned. And ultimately saw a way that these practices were actually specifically helping me develop resiliency and strength and an ability to kind of, stay in touch with my own highest and best, notwithstanding these challenges. And I just started to feel like this definitely should be a part of education being offered to legal professionals, my law students, especially the students of color that I was encountering here in San Francisco from all different backgrounds, actually, not just African American, but really all of us, given all of the challenges of our time. And so I started to offer them in the law school context, and that became the kind of slow, in a way, incubator for what ended up being this work of my life. And so this book is just one of what may be a number, in a way, manifestations of this ongoing work for me, because I do see it as a kind of a lifelong endeavor.
Thanks, Rhonda. I really appreciate you setting the context for the work in the book and our conversation today. There's so much in your story that I can resonate with, but it's it's just interesting to hear generationally, just sort of the time in which you were born and raised, having such a significant impact on the way that you looked at opportunity, the way that you found yourself situated, and how these practices sort of came to be a source of grounding for you.
Yeah.
And that's really how your book begins, right? So for those of you who haven't read the book, The Inner Work of Racial Justice takes us on a journey from grounding to liberation practices, and each section is rooted in mindfulness-based practice that helps us to traverse these murky waters, and to traverse them together, and with a sense of both solidarity and purpose. And so one of the things we have, a treat for you all today, and rather than a traditional reading, Rhonda is going to share with us one of these mindfulness-based practices so that we can all get grounded together and think about how to do this work of both the inner work, but in community as well. So I'll hand it back over to you, Rhonda.
Yeah, thank you so very much. And I'll preface this by saying, again, the particular teaching that I was doing in law school actually enabled me to do a deep dive in what many people have now come to know as critical race theory. But I was also kind of, again, drawing on my own mindfulness and compassion practices of the sort that I'm going to offer momentarily. And so for me, bringing those two together was the kind of natural challenge that I faced? How is it that we bring the willingness to look at things that are hard, the willingness to really deconstruct the things that have been constructed in and around us that separate us, and really look at, more of the hidden truth, more of what my colleague in the teaching field, Parker Palmer, calls the hidden wholeness that is often obscured by some of the ways that we have inherited and imbibed these patterns and practices, where we live, who we live with. That hidden wholeness that could help us, be more resilient as we explore these histories together is part of what I wanted to help us reveal by offering these practices. And so with humility and with that kind of intentionality, I want to offer a practice here now. So the invitation here is to just, however you are and wherever you are right now, take a conscious breath and invite a coming home to the body in these few moments that we're sharing here. Feeling yourself in connection as you breathe in and out with this air that is this conscious breath. And perhaps taking a little bit longer exhale than normal and allowing yourself to rest and relax and feel the contact between your body and the support beneath you, whether it be a chair, a bed, or if you happen to be sitting on a cushion on the floor as I am. However you happen to be right now, to allow yourself to just drop just a little bit more into that support, and through that to feel beneath you the support of the earth that we all share in this moment and in every moment of our lives. So now, as you just allow yourself to breathe naturally and at a pace that's comfortable for you, see if you can feel the sort of inner well-being that is within you, whatever is well. We may be struggling in some way. Things may not all be perfect wherever we are. Our bodies may be in some state of illness or struggling with some difficulty that only we know. But the invitation is to sense into what is well with you in this moment, as best you can. And breathe into that which brought you here to this conversation, that which connects all of us on this earth in this moment. And through that, the great mystery of our being alive together. And the great potential that rests in that. Now, if you're willing, call to mind your own family of origin. And maybe call to mind one particular person from your family. And again, this can be your chosen family now, your biological family, but call to mind someone with whom you felt safe and loved, cared for. Community in which you were raised, in some place where you felt at least some measure of connection, ease. And the invitation is to identify one person from that place. It could be your own mother or father, but someone that helped nurture you and helped you feel a sense of your own inherent belonging. Now imagine going back beyond that particular individual to their ancestors and their ancestors before them. For me, I often think of the matrilineal line, the line of mothers and grandmothers. But if another way of imagining this is more comfortable for you, I invite you to lean into that. But the invitation is to imagine the many, many generations that exist before us those we know. Some of us know something about our lineages and ancestry, and some of us know relatively little, beyond a generation or two. So, however you happen to be meeting this, if you know very little about your own family of origin, just know that there is this vast human family from whom each of us, in one way or another, emerged. And so imagine going back and back and back to, let's imagine the earliest female ancestor, the earliest mother, if you will, in the lineages from which we come. And imagine that person, if she could look out upon all of us here today. First of all, if we keep going back, that may be the same female ancestor for all of us. We don't know. But if we can imagine that, imagine if there were a message, if she were looking out upon this vast human, disconnected, many multicultural groups living all around the earth now, having expanded out with that spirit of exploration and risk-taking. Just imagine what this mother would say, looking at all the challenges we face, looking at all the ways we connect and the ways we hurt each other. And lean in and imagine she has a message for you. What might be that message that this ancient ancestor, this ancient mother, might say to you to assist you in connecting with your original medicine for this time, in connecting with your voice to help discern something important about how we might move forward together? What is that message? What are you hearing in your soul and your spirit right now? As we lean in and we listen to these messages and take them in, if possible, maybe sense into some gratitude that we happen to be here alive in this moment and able then to experience the opportunities of being alive together and the potential. So as we bring this meditation to a close, just maybe sensing into the possibility that in a practice like this, we may be touching into something profound and important as a way of helping us all find our way, our unique individual way home to a sense of belonging and safety, but also our way together. So just taking a few minutes now to just breathe in and out. Rest in the sense of your inner well-being as best as you can touch into it right now. And when and as you're ready, if the eyes have been closed, the invitation now is to open your eyes and open up to shifting into kind of a listening engagement mode now. But if you're willing, see if you can in some way hold a sense of that thread from the practice that we just engaged in, whatever came up for you as a message, as a support for our work here and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. I really appreciate you leading us in this way and guiding us from our distant past and into our present moment in time. And one of the things that I particularly appreciate, besides the powerful message that I received, is this notion of this matrilineal legacy, the mothers that have come before us, so to speak. And so I'll start my first question has to do with your matrilineal line. One of the people that you introduced us to in such a vulnerable and brave way is your own, your own family. And Nan, for me, was kind of a central figure to me as I navigated through the book. And so I found myself being really curious about how, if when you were writing this book, if you had sort of Nan looking over your shoulder and you were presenting this finished tome to her, what might she make of it? I think that you named her as one of your first spiritual teachers,
Yes.
and talked about how she centered herself before, moving throughout her day. So yeah, what would Nan say about the inner work of healing racial justice?
I love this question. First of all, I'm chuckling a little bit because I think she would. you know, um, my grandmother had a difficult life. So I want to be very, very clear that, when I talk about, and when I, turn toward this question, inviting me to reflect on what my grandmother, who passed away in the mid to late 1990s, when I reflect on what she may have thought of this work and this book, I can't help but feel, the deep respect I have and appreciation I have for having had the experience of coming through her lifeline, living for a time in her very warm little home in Kinston, North Carolina. And I lived with her a little bit off and on when my parents were going through a divorce. And so it was from that experience that I saw her get up before dawn every day, turn that light on in her room, but stay in that room and begin a period of inner devotion, praise, prayer. For her, it was Christian tradition. And we knew that to be her time, not a time to be disturbed. And then she would come out of that and continue that in a way that would invite us. So she would be reading the Bible in a kind of a place near a hearth, near this old beat up potbelly stove with a little rocking chair. And we could then join her for a bit of this. So, I really feel whenever I talk about her, the warmth of the home that she created. But I also know that when we would peek into that bedroom, one of the things we would see, and even as a little girl I couldn't help notice, was like the pictures of the family on the mirror in her bedroom, which included, myself, cousins, and different members of our biological family, but also the children of the family whose house she had been cleaning for years. A family kind of improbably named the Outlaw family, actually. So she had pictures of the Outlaw boys in with the other family members. And I didn't exactly understand that at first, but I definitely understood that in some ways she saw these as her family. So I know that, I opened the story with the story of a kind of a romance I had as a teenager. A romance I was able to share with her a bit. I shared with her about this. She was totally tickled by this. It was like filled with a certain kind of joy to be able to witness this kind of connection in a way that was, relatively safe for us at the time. So I think part of what I think what she would say is she would be very, I think, proud of me in this way that I've been integrating life lessons about what it means to live together, to struggle together, to try to make a way out of no way, as she would say. She would be proud of the effort to bring people together around circles. I use the metaphor of the campfire or the table, partly because every weekend we would go to a little church and there would be food. My grandmother would be baking cakes. I would want more of the cakes to stay at home, and then they would go out of the house. But I mean, there was always this appreciation of community and a sense that each of our lives mattered. So my grandmother, of course, didn't go to formal education beyond elementary school, frankly. She couldn't. She worked in the tobacco fields. She nevertheless knew she had something to say, something to teach, something to learn all through her life. So I really think she would be, I know in a certain way that she would be very proud. And 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 something about her spirit of the possibility, even despite the difficulties. Her spirit of like that at the end of the day we're here to care for each other and not amass great things and have built up fancy houses, but to just care for each other wherever and however we are. And I hope that the spirit of that comes through my work.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think, one of the things as I was reading the book that, struck me was my own, the book is structured in such a way that it really does take you on, an inward journey through some really challenging concepts.
Yeah.
And as someone who has done work in this field, who really espouses the sort of not the sort of, but the true interconnectedness and interdependence that we all face, I found myself struggling surprisingly with some of the ideas, and so I want to hear a little bit about how you balance the sort of sense of safety, for example, that people of color.
Yes.
In particular, or marginalized folks, or however you want to describe them, might feel trying to move toward this understanding of or an appreciation for manifestation of this our common humanity.
Yeah.
When oftentimes that feels so incredibly unsafe to do.
Yes. I'm so glad that you're naming this because it is never far from my vision, if you will. My sort of the kind of landscape that I look out on is, and the kind of emotional terrain that I know is present in all of this is very aware. I'm very aware in my own work of the reality that that it has been dangerous. I mean, that that what we call marginalized people of color, black Americans in the United States, but not only black Americans, but race and racism, the particular theme of the reflections in this book. Of course, that intersects with all other different types of vulnerabilities, gender and sex orientation and class and immigration status and disability and ability and all of that, right? They all enter R. But of course, we're taking race as a point of departure in this book, just to give us this space to look at that aspect of our otherwise rich and diverse experiences. And when we do look at that, we can see again how race and racism mean what they mean is certain bodies are targeted and targeted for potential violence with of all shades, subtle to extreme, and the color line and the racial hierarchies, white over black, and all of the different dynamics, the triangulations, all of the different ways that racism has invited or sought to kind of divide and conquer and create different ways of identifying ourselves that then can reinforce these dynamics of separation and of a sense of a struggle for access to limited resources in a pie where we all are competing against each other. So in within all of that, vulnerability is real, violence has been real, danger has been real, and black folk and black women in particular, let's just say, have suffered a lot, have been we've all been victimized. I've been victimized. I've felt the pain not only of physical kind of threat, but of course all the many different sort of psychological threats, economic threats that just travel with racism. So the need for some safety is very real, and partly because of that, we of course have tended to find ourselves drawn to other people who look somewhat like us, to other people with a racial affinity or other affinity that we can feel, where we can feel a little bit more safe. And strong and important and beautiful cultures have emerged out of this. Out of the ways we have created a sense of home and well-being amongst our kind. So I think to invite a reflection on our human connectivity, or the ability to connect with other human beings. My work is not about somehow avoiding the realities of our differences and our different cultures, acculturations, the different places where we felt safe and not. In fact, what I'm hoping that we can do with this work is, from this place of where we are and who we are, kind of feeling the strength of our own lineages, our own experiences, what they, again, that original medicine, that this experience, that experience, our experiences are meant to teach us. So it's not about shying away from our particular ways that we've been navigating these waters, and the racial identities we carry, the cultures we feel drawn to and celebrate. But it is about opening the aperture to be able to kind of navigate all of that without losing sight of the fact that kind of fundamentally, at the very same time as we're all these beautiful, radically different, beautiful, 10,000 flowers, right? We're all emerging in these 100% unique ways, given our very unique paths and journeys, but also, finding affinities among people who listen to the same music, eat similar food, etc. If in the midst of that, we can at the same time remember that we are the same species, that we all bleed, we all have the same fundamental desire for safety, for love, for understanding, right? To not have bombs raining down on our bodies, to be able to have enough to eat, and can, if given enough support, find ways of understanding each other's experiences despite those differences. I've seen that enough to know very deeply in my own body and bones that that's true. So yes, my work is really seeking to say, it's really important to just start where we are and to give ourselves the support that we need. This is why the book says healing ourselves, first approximation of what I consider to be a kind of personal justice. How am I taking care of myself? How am I accessing what I consider to be the kind of gift of being alive right now, and the sense of inherent belonging? I don't believe in any accidents. I believe everybody who is here belongs here on this planet right now. So how am I taking care of myself, right? Full stop, fundamental, my responsibility and gift of, the gift of my life is to first sort of do what I need to do to take care. And if that means healing, if that means creating my own space, if it means separating from circumstances that feel toxic and don't feel safe enough, give ourselves this. We deserve the space to heal, because we have lived through a lot of difficult times, and again, the violence through which the notion of race and racism have been maintained historically and through today, that's very real. So, on the one hand, let's do what we can to ensure that we are taking good care of ourselves and building up a sense of trustworthiness in our own being, faith in ourselves. By which I mean to say, I feel like part of my own practices have helped me to sort of deepen the sense that I can take care of myself, so that I know when it's time for me to leave a certain setting. And not to carry, and also know when I've left that setting and now I'm safe, to be able to let go of the distress of that, because I've taken care and I'm not in that vulnerable place anymore. And so I'm open again to being able to connect and see, are there people that are trustworthy here? So to me, yes, the practices and the path that I'm, on myself and that I'm in some sense drawing on in this book is one where it is inviting us into kind of more supple, nuanced and flexible and also courageous ownership of our own lives and the fullness of that. And realizing the importance of first, yes, taking care, but also having a sort of kind of protective. I think the practices have a protective dimension. So they help us notice, oh, yeah, you know what? This actually is not a safe place or space. The people that I'm with, may be trying, but actually may need a little bit more to do a little bit more work. And maybe I'm here for that. And maybe that's work that they need to do in another space and place. So it's really about it is about that sort of being in a way more capable of drawing on all of the richness that human life embeds in us. I think fundamentally oppression strips us of the sense of the power of what it means to actually be alive. And so I think these practices can help connect us back to the full power that we have in being alive. And from that place, to engage with each other in ways that help, keep us grounded in the ability to say yes and to say no. And in that sense, to sort of do what we can to have the safety that we're looking for come up first and foremost most from this century that we've embedded in ourselves. And then to have the courage to ask for more of what we need around us to make sure that we're building out safer spaces for everybody.
Well, I really do appreciate that, and I will say that it's the my history of practice and the practices that were outlined in the book that really did help me stay with it through some uncomfortable moments of like, is that what you really mean, Rhonda?
Yes.
Do you really mean to say that?
Yes.
I don't know if that's my experience.
Right. Good. Yes.
And so, it was like one of those moments where I was like, aha, she got me here. Cause now I'm doing this practice and I'm all grounded and I can see, a little bit differently here. I can have a little bit more of an expansive view of what's being said beyond the, sort of reactivity that arises when confronted with, really complex and nuanced things. And I think, that was just such a human experience to have, and the ability to be both compassionate to myself, to even, adding some levity to, to the moments, oh yeah, you were just reminded to like be in practice and to be grounded here. This is really, it was an interesting journey of reading for myself. So I have like so many thoughts and questions for you that came out of what you just said. One of which is, that these, you're saying that these practices have created this inner resilience. I love this inner century, and but also the inner, that curiosity too that arises. When I read the foreword to this, and just kind of reading between the lines and the relationship that you and John have built over time and over the years, and also just the labor of like putting this out into the world. You are situating yourself, and I think even before you've named sort of, there was this hope that both you and or the book is this bridge for folks, and I do think I have I'm curious, just as a how do you take care of yourself when sort of expending this emotional labor, right? Like there is a lot of work in deciding that this is my ministry. I'm willing to be a bridge, right? Yes. And not everybody really can or wants to or has the wherewithal to take up that mantle. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about like, what how do you I call it emotional labor, and the sort of newer word in our common lexicon here, but
Mhm.
I'm curious, how do you label that work and how do you navigate it?
Oh, well, I mean, thank you so much for asking about it. I think I've alluded to a little bit of how I do that and how I think of these practices as giving me a certain kind of like inner infrastructure for being able to do that. Giving me first and foremost, helping deliver me to this sense of like, yeah, my life actually does fully matter. And I'm going to try and make the most of this journey in the limited time that I have. So that's a real fundamental foundational piece of this. Again, the sort of existential gratitude that I'm alive now, and it could be otherwise. Any moment it could be otherwise. We know this. We're coming at this in the middle of the pandemic times and war happening and threatening it. So how do we make the most of our lives? Very real question for me. Very kind of bracing question every day. And so for me, there is this personal project of like developing in myself the capacity to courageously meet my life, and to recognize there's no accidents. I'm born in this body, cisgender, brown body, female. There are no accidents. I could have taken the painful aspects of my experience and held them as a barrier and a kind of a wall, and the justification for all of the many painful things that have occurred to me, and have been and through that I might have missed some of the ways that this life is still an opportunity for me to make of it the best I can. And so I think, from that place of just gratitude and being alive, and also the bracing recognition that we don't have forever. And then that choice of like, well, how do I want to be is a real one that I want to take up right now. And so I take care of myself with a view toward being of some service in this time. And, for me, that has been in an academic setting for a long time. I've been a law professor for more than 20 years, partly because, I had this view that would be a place where I could offer. And, of course, in that settings, people are coming together from different backgrounds. And I was seeing everywhere, from my own experience at the University of Virginia School of Law, without which I wouldn't be here, by the way, gave me a lot of credentialing and opportunities, and also gave me some experiences of racism, of how hard it is for us when we come together in these predominantly white spaces, those of us who are of color, so those experiences gave me so much to work with that I, really felt like either I can work with this and make the most of the teaching potential of those experiences, or they can defeat me. And so to do the work of transforming these difficulties into teaching opportunities and rather than, defeats, requires me to be able to take care of myself along the way. And that's really how I first started, I think, doing these practices. I was transitioning from law school into becoming a lawyer first before teaching. So I spent 4.5 years as a lawyer here in San Francisco. And I was about to take on that new job, but I realized I'd been trained very much to be up in my head. And also, by the way, I'd been trained in the military. Some people know that, some people don't. So I've become a military officer. I've been trained in graduate school and law and this and that, all up here. And I realized that for me to be going into a predominantly white law firm, only black lawyer there, female, one of the few women and only black here in San Francisco, a brand new place, which was like another world in a way. I needed more than I had been given cognitively and intellectually and in that professional developmental kind of academic and even military training track. I had gotten all these great things. I needed something that was much more holistically grounded. And I remembered my grandmother. So this is all just to say, fundamentally, everything I'm doing is about how I've been committed to taking care of myself on the particular journey that my life and the opportunities I've seized has opened up for me, where I've been moving into spaces where people are from all walks of life. The institutions are predominantly white, or have been, many of them, where I've worked and taught. So to bear up in those places and to flourish in those places, I've leaned into my practice, and I do every day, every single day. And sometimes that means taking a break. I'm on a leave of absence from my university right now, in part because I needed to take a break. Sometimes we do need to pass that baton on to someone else in a particular setting. A particular dynamic needs to be seen through creative lenses. We need to devote time to some other call like writing, and we need to clear some space for that. So I do think that I love that part of the question, because I wouldn't be here if at the end of the day, all of this weren't about caring for myself as a support for my desire to be of service and care for other people. Because that metaphor that we all learn when we travel, if we are privileged to get on a plane at all, the flight attendants will tell us to put that oxygen mask on ourselves first. And the other part of that metaphor, of course, is so that we can then put it on our children or little ones, like we can help other people. It is all, we're embedded in a world. And again, back to that precious opportunity to be alive. How do I want to live? I want to live in service, but I don't want to, but I recognize that service to myself is the foundation for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. One, I want to remind the folks in the audience that the Q&A is open. So please do type your questions into the Q&A so that I can incorporate those into our talk. And in the meantime, I have one more question, Rhonda. So I'll share, there are two particular gifts that you gave to me, sort of indirectly, that have really had a profound impact on the way that I see how to conceptualize, like how being of service is a particular kind of act. And one is through the work that you did at the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society in creating the tree of contemplative practices. Mm-hmm. And so I remember seeing that graphic and seeing social justice on there, mm-hmm. and activism as contemplative acts. And I was like, yes. Okay, like myself, because, I didn't always see myself as this, yogi sitting in lotus position under a tree, like bringing on, right, nirvana for myself or everyone. I saw my contemplation was a contemplation that was always in motion and always in service. And it was just such a relief to see, there is this school of thought that says, yes, this is a way of being in that. And then the other one that you gave to me was a quote that you mentioned at the very beginning of your book, where folks describe your contemplation as a long, loving look at the real. And both of those things have held me in good stead. Yeah. And so one of the things that I want to ask you about keeping both of these things in mind is, and I think that you get to this in the liberation section of the book, but there's a lot that's about like this inner work, inner healing, and interpersonal engagement. Mm-hmm. And yet we know that we are also impacted significantly by like systems that are operating.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I just want to hear a little bit about this inner work in action, this, the interpersonal into community, and how do you see this impacting larger systems?
Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you so much for that.
For that long preface.
No, thank you so much for really turning us toward absolutely everything you said was spot on. And thank you, and I'm honored by it. But really turning us toward the systemic piece. And, I will, to sort of briefly say, again, as a law professor, I am in this, I play a role in the systems. And I definitely feel, that part of what these practices are inviting us to do is to kind of feel again, that multidimensionality of our own existence. And that, again, we're always embedded in systems. They're all already embedded in us. Peggy Mcintosh, whose name some will know from having introduced the idea of white privilege, and she's written about that. She's a teacher herself. And in one of her teachings, this is a point that she makes, that whenever we're doing our own inner work or personal work or interpersonal work, we are at the same time engaging in systems, and by our presence and the way we are in those systems, we are manifesting the potential for change, and actually, in ways that are often very subtle, enacting change. Those changes may, again, be very, very small, very incremental. They are not necessarily the things that make it into press releases or give us giant, indicia of like, we did this, we conquered this, a trophy, right? But that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. All of the systems that we're fighting to make more just are created by and manifest through human beings. And so, for me, I've been working in law, which is, of course, this huge system, and in academia, another. Wherever we are, we're in some systems. We're either directly in community service, we're teaching, we're in business, we're in church or religious organizations. Wherever we are, we're embedded in systems. They're in us. And so, yes, for me, this work is about the personal and the interpersonal as a support for the work that we're doing to try to make these systems more just. And, I think that as a law professor, of course, and a person in academia, of course, you see all the different ways that we're trained to think of the work as very external. We just got to get out there and do this and hold people accountable. And there, of course, there is that aspect of the work. And so in the part of the book called Liberating, I talk about a number of things. Politicians, other law professors, including Professor Charles Black, who, was one of the unsung, the team of people who helped litigate to bring down segregation in the United States, to bring about Brown versus Board of Education, to bring about a generation of people who could lead to, amongst which we find Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and who taught people like Barack Obama and me, et cetera, lineage. And so in the book, in speaking about Charles Black, who's my grandmother's contemporary, I'm connecting those dots. He's a white racialized lawyer who took up his responsibility to help bring down the system of segregation, which he could see was causing unnecessary suffering to all of us, because he reflected on his own experience growing up in Texas and then encountering Louis Armstrong's music and saying, what the hell? I've been lied to about these people. And so I place stories like that in the book to inspire us to say, look at our own life and our own experiences. Recognize that these experiences are meant to teach us something important, and that our lives matter, and we don't have forever to bring forth our original medicine. And then do what we can where we are. So many people don't know the name Charles Black, right? He didn't do it to become this famous person, but without him, in a certain sense, we wouldn't be here doing what we are doing, because, again, no one person is responsible for the changes, but together, collectively, change has happened. Or else, literally, right, I would probably still be in that small town in Kinston, North Carolina, cleaning houses like my grandmother was her only real option, given the circumstances of her life. So, yes, systemic change is why we're here. And it's just my humble suggestion that if we are not changing ourselves as part of that, well, I mean, that to me is one of the lessons of the civil rights era. You know, having sat at the knees of, you know, civil rights legends and hippies and people who worked together and fell apart. And, you know, I've heard the stories of how the failure to work on the self meant that those traumas and those difficulties were embedded, were what, you know, caused in some measure some of those efforts to not be as successful as they might have been. And for me, I just think about, like, imagine today we get the world, we get the reparations, we get whatever, all the different things we think we want. The equity is real in our organization. And if our hearts are still carrying wounds, if we are not doing what we can to make the most of our ethical and our responsibilities to treat each other with less harm, then we're going to recreate patterns, and a generation later they're going to have to go back and do the same work all over again. So I really want to get at the roots of what causes these harmful patterns and up in them. And as we do the systemic change, to then ideally, you know, we are the change. Again, as more eloquent people than I have said, we are the change that we are hoping to make manifest in the world.
Well, Rhonda, thank you so much for this talk. And I really appreciate you leaning into sort of that, the moral and ethical implications of this work. We just have a minute or so. Do you have any last thoughts or thoughts about what's next for you on this journey?
Well, thank you so much. So I am writing again right now. You know, my current effort is you know, just an effort to sort of explore a little bit more the, you know, this idea that this work is about choosing how to live. And for me, you know, ethics, morality, these are really the foundation of it, but a kind of loving, not punitive, but a loving embrace of our responsibility toward each other. And so, yeah, the next book is a little bit more kind of maybe a leaner focused discussion of, you know, some of the kind of underpinnings, the underlying ethical commitments of this kind of spiritual activism. Because I do think that is what I'm making a case for here. Like, underlying ethic of care, starting with ourselves, extending to each other for activism in that world. And so I'm working on that. I'm working with a co-author on that. And teaching. So please join me at rhondavmcgee.com. I'm just learning how to make my online calendar a little bit more reflective of what I'm doing. But I'd love to meet those of you who are here on this call on that journey. And thank you, my dear Eboni. It's been just a joy to connect with you again. It's been way too long. And I hope this means we're just going to find other ways to get together.
Absolutely. You may definitely find me in one of those classes. So it's time for us to wrap things up. Rhonda, thank you so much. It's been truly a pleasure connecting with you in this way. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to this special event. Please connect with our author in the festival at virginiavabook.org. You can also purchase books at your local bookseller or on the website. And also please stay tuned for future festival events at, again, vabook.org. And the full schedule is on that website, and more information is in the chat. So thanks to everyone for tuning in, and I look forward to connecting with you in other ways soon.
Thanks, everyone. Be well and be safe on your journey from here.